Well, actually, when I signed up, I can remember now, it was just they'd taken over an empty shop as a recruiting centre, and I saw it, and I was full of zeal from the fighter pilots, etc., you know, and I went in and applied.
Your heart was set on being a pilot, not a mechanic or something?
Oh no, definitely a pilot, but that was pure glamour, really, you know. Fighter pilot glamour. Looking back on the intake of people who joined and were going potential pilots, they were of a better class than I was, really. These are very minute things now in Canada, but in England, things like that were quite important. And this is where I made sure that I answered the right questions, you know. What do you play? Rugby, sir. Well, rugby, yes, but football really was the game, but I played rugby because that was the better class people then. And I think they only asked me one knowledgeable question, you know, where's the Greenwich Meridian? And I could more or less say that right away, you know, I knew it intimately. So I just turned to a local map and put my finger down straight through it, you know. Good show, they said, good show. This was at the inertial training wing, where we were gathered round and given in a circle and given some beautiful underwear, spotless underwear, silk and everything else. And they briefed by the sergeant there saying, now listen to me, you lot. He said, you're going to meet the Duke of Kent and you just answer just straight questions, etc., etc., you know. So when the Duke came round to me, funny enough, I always remember he had a strong perfume, a scented perfume, which I rather disliked. And he said, oh, what did you do, you see? And you could hear the voices, they were bank managers and things like this. And they came up to me and asked me, and I looked at him and I said I was a navvy. And he probably didn't even know what a navvy was. Navvy then was a labourer, really, who built a lot of the canals in England. But as soon as the Duke of Kent had disappeared, all these beautiful underwear and everything was whipped away. And I always remember because we were given some terrible underwear. They were like pantaloons, they gripped round the leg. They'd make it horsewear, I think. Terrible, strange, oh, it looked terribly out of date and everything. I always flew with an instructor. He sat in the front seat of the Tiger Moth, and I sat in the back. And the first flight you have, he would watch your reactions, really, to see what you were like. When he took off, I was delighted with the whole thing. And I was looking over the side there and smiling to myself. Didn't realise he was watching me in a little rear view mirror, you know. In elementary training, I went up to Perth in Scotland. Had a wonderful time there. I loved Scotland and I loved flying and everything else. I happened to be flying in formation with this friend, another pilot friend, and I pointed down to the bridge under, and he nodded and said yes. So we both did it, actually. And it's rather easy, actually. The bridge is bigger than I thought. But if we'd been found out, of course, we probably would have been thrown out of the intake, you know. And then off to Canada, to Saskatchewan. I ran into actually quite a severe prairie firestorm, quite intense. And if so much so that I had to decide, I've got to land. I'll just take a wheat field. Landed no problem. High wind even then, actually. In fact, I came over a cemetery and I thought at the time, it's a bit apt. The people who put me up, he was the British guy. I thought as a kind of thank you to him, I'd do a bit of low flying, which I did. Unfortunately, I hit some telegraph phone wires, brought those down, and I thought, oh dear. And the telephone company telephoned the airfield. So, of course, I hadn't said a word because the aircraft was perfectly safe. I'd checked that. I was hauled before the CO, and the CO, he was a nice chap. He said, are you going to have my punishment or a court-martial? Well, court-martial to me was dreadful, you know. And I said, oh, I'll take your punishment, sir. And he said, okay. Well, and it was, I think, his 16 days in a glass house. The glass house, they called it, was the prison. Back to Weyburn, called before the CO again, and he had a bit of a twinkle in his eye, I thought. And he said, well, how did you like it? And I, quick as the flash, I said, a wonderful hotel, sir. I feel much better for it. Eventually, when we got our wings, a bit of a booze up at the end with officers, training officers, drinking with us. And one of them said to me, he said, you'll either kill yourself or get a DFC, Cameron. One of the things to show that he was a hairy-chested pilot, you beat up, as they called it, you beat up the flight. And I beat up the flight and I was too low. And I was beginning a turn, banking up an angle like this, going round. And my wingtips struck the ground. Took about, I think, a foot off the wingtip. And also hit the tailplane, I think, which was flapping about a little. Anyways, I managed to get down. And of course, I was right in front of the CO, wasn't a very pleasant man either. And he just told me, he said, you're out for a court-martial. Eventually, I finished up in front of this, I forget now, what he said. I think he was the squadron leader. And he rattled off my flight sergeant, Cameron, so and 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 so. You have been punished by court-martial to be put down to from flight sergeant to sergeant. And in my opinion, you're fucking lucky, he said. Take him away, sergeant. And I was marched out. I was lucky, actually. We were hit once when we had a bomb on board, a 2,000-pound bomb, which is a big bomb, of course. We called them cookies. We were over the Dutch border and there was a loud explosion. The plane rocked a little and everything, and we kind of increased speed and got away from it all. When we started flying over the sea, North Sea, we found we were losing fuel. So we narrowed that down to one of the engines. We cut that engine out, flew on 3 engines then, you see. So when we got to Airman, I called up the airfield. I'm saying carrying a bomb. And then there'd be a silence and they'd say, what kind of bomb, you see? And I'd say, a cookie. And they weren't very happy with that, of course. As we landed, I think actually either 1 or 2 more engines cut out. So I was left with 1 engine to taxi on. Couldn't have flown. I more or less finished on 39 sorties. Normally, you finished on 30 ops.
After the war, you wanted to continue being a pilot, didn't you?
Well, I did, but I fact that I had too many things against me, really. Written in red ink, actually, how I was charged and everything, and I thought, well, that will probably shoot me down right away as a pilot.